Hey, Gleb here. In this video, I'm going to rather quickly post-process the render result from the seashore lighting tutorial to add a cinematic polish to it in a matter of minutes. For that, I'm going to use a quick post-pro node chain for Blender's compositor, which you can download from creativeshrimp.com. It's a freebie. We've built this in the post-pro chapter of cinematic lighting course to grade our minerals render. It's made up of very basic yet surprisingly versatile built-in blocks. There is nothing elaborate about it. It can be used to quickly grade, pretty much anything. In this video, I'll walk you through using this node chain. This is Blender Compositor. I've loaded the OpenXR file with the seashore render, which is also included with the demo files for that setup, by the way. So we're in the compositor, just to be sure. You can load any file there, but I'll go with this one, and it has to be an EXR format, not PNG, JPEG, or anything like that. This has to be an intermediate format meant for post-pro. You'll see that color space switches to linear Rec 709 automatically when you load an EXR there. The setup is organized into several blocks: tonal, glare, lens, you name it. Let me scroll through the rest so you can see it at a glance. Pretty basic setup, ending with the viewer node. The viewer gets passed onto the backdrop because this button is enabled. And if this node is selected, you can click and drag the center point to move the preview around or resize it like this. Some people don't mind some overlap when nodes are on top of that preview, but I usually keep things separated like this. Image at the bottom, nodes at the top. Okay, let me scroll back to the beginning and start with tonal adjustments. The way you use this setup is simple. Press M to toggle any adjustment. For instance, exposure. You can toggle anything on and off anytime. That's basically how you interact with this preset or setup. Before doing any node work, the color management panel obviously has a major impact on your render. Fundamental things like view transform and any choices you have there, AGX, Filmic, Kronos, Aces, all of it influence the final look. Most of the view transforms, namely Aces, Filmic and AGX, are fairly similar in how they handle colors and everything. These three behave a bit like film, meaning rendering slightly desaturated highlights, neutral color rendition, and having a good range. These two, Kronos PBR and Standard, are slightly more digital in character and a bit more problematic. Standard simply blows out highlights in a very nasty digital way. And Kronos PBR Neutral is mostly for product shots where you need the brand colors to be faithfully represented, and not so much for cinematic shots like this, because it tends to oversaturate colors, at least compared to those three. Those differences become even more noticeable at higher exposure levels. These three behave pretty similar again, and pretty safe not blowing out highlights or oversaturating anything, while these two are a bit more unsafe. Kronos potentially saturating bright parts a bit too much in a very digital way, and Standard simply starts falling apart at that point. As simple as that. Without going into the weeds, let's choose AGX with base contrast here. It's a very neutral view transform and it's very safe for our post-pro. Okay, in the first block, tonal adjustments, we have exposure, which is the same as the exposure slider in color management. Just put here so everything is in one place. I'll give it a slight boost, 0.2 or something. M mutes and unmutes it. This one is RGB curves. It's in film-like mode, meaning it will preserve the original hues. It has an S-shaped contrast curve, so that's pretty much our contrast adjustment. I won't go too crazy with it, just a touch more contrast, where darks get pulled down a touch and highlights pulled up. And that's it. You see? Just a little bit of contrast. Then we have the Tune Image node there. It's a great tool which works similarly to the DaVinci Resolve's Color Boost. The Preserve Colors checkbox, making sure the colors don't escape the gamuts. Oh, actually, I don't need it for now. Okay, I'm setting Color Boost to 0. The tonal elements of this tune image node, and why I've placed it there is the contrast and these three adjustments. The contrast is regular global contrast correction. It can be used to add some crunchiness to the image, but I have to say it right away, it's not as safe as RGB curves. It can really crunch the blacks if you take it too far. Now these three are the local contrast corrections. They use edge detection and feature detection and other such stuff, so they apply extra contrast based on the features of the image. Here's a bit of a warning. Adding too much of these can literally destroy the image. However, in moderate quantities they can be useful. Clarity boosts the mid-tone contrast, making the image feel crunchier. Detail is like texture micro-contrast. It works on a bit higher frequency detail compared to clarity. And sharpen boosts a really fine grain. These are similar to Lightroom or Adobe Camera Raw local tone adjustment sliders. You might recognize those. I rarely use them, and I won't use them here either. These three can make it look like garbage when overdone. But hey, it's also tonal adjustments, just local, and they have their place. Glare makes the hottest pixels bloom and swell. I usually set the threshold in such a way so it picks only the hottest areas. Direct sun, specular reflections and so on, that sort of thing. Strength is simply the multiplier, or mix factor. And size is how wide the bloom spreads. These two are another type of light diffusion. If you crank up the mix factor, you'll see the blurred image. By blending just a little bit of that in, you can add a dreamy, soft light quality to the image. Think retro movies. The amount of blur is controlled here. That's a really interesting effect, which should be used in moderation like all other effects. So it's best to just add a touch of it. By the way, if any of the effects and slider feels slow or laggy, if you feel a lag on adjusting the blur, for instance, it might suggest that you need to tweak one thing in the compositor settings. For me, it's pretty snappy, but if it feels slow on your end, then go to render settings. Performance. And if the compositor device is set to CPU, let me close these ones. If it's set to CPU, switch it to GPU. With CPU, especially when many nodes are in use, it can get pretty slow. GPU usually provides a much smoother user experience. It can definitely make the entire post-processing process more enjoyable. So yeah, it's something that I wanted to mention really quickly. Okay, back to this diffusion. It is very creamy. I like it. The next one is lens chromatic aberration. Let's zoom in a bit. This is the effect of colorful fringing near the edges, an optical imperfection that helps to break up that CG sharpness. This stuff. Of course, it should be used in moderation too. Next we have power window with some brightening. The ellipse mask can be clicked and moved like that, right on the backdrop. I'll punch out this portion near the rocks. It works in overlay mode, so it's like boosting the brightness. Vignette is the opposite of that. It's darkening near the edges with a bunch of easily tweakable parameters. Like factor, feather. It can be placed asymmetrically if you want, to make the left part of the image slightly darker, for instance. And feathered out like this to make it nice and smooth. It is a simple yet very powerful effect, creating the tonal gradient, which becomes a gradient of the viewer's attention. That's really cool. This node, hue saturation value, is mostly for desaturating the image. Useful if you are going for a bleach bypass style look. It's usually good for that sort of cinematic desaturation. And then we have Tune Image's Color Boost, which is awesome for boosting the overall colorfulness. It works like DaVinci Resolve's famous color boost and can be pushed really high without breaking the image, all the way to 1 and still not clipping. At least unless you untick this Preserve Colors checkbox, then it starts clipping. So keep it checked. It's fantastic for bringing out color, especially when used moderately. The HSV saturation is more prone to clipping and producing strange color mixtures, when used for amplifying the color saturation, I mean. See? So this one is better suited for desaturating, as I've mentioned already. Okay, for now I'll bring color boost back to 0. Then we have color temperature to make it cooler or warmer, depending on whether the second color slot is blue or orange. And this should go into green or purple direction, so this is basically tint. I won't use any of that for now, so I think I'll move it out of the way like that. The RGB curves are for applying non-linear adjustments to individual color channels. For instance, boosting the green channel in highlights and pulling it down in the lower end of the tonal range. Or doing something similar to the blue channel. I will again just boost the blue levels in the highlights and dip it slightly in the shadows. That creates a subtle split toning effect, and I like how it looks. So these are RGB curves for non-linear color adjustments. Ctrl H toggles the unused inputs, so you can play with the mix factor if you wish. I'll just go with a full effect, and Ctrl H to hide it again. Nice. Finally, we have film grain, created with the sensor noise node. I'm almost always in favor of adding a bit of grain. Not over the top, of course, but so it still breaks up the pristine, almost too perfect digital look, both in luminance and chroma noise. This is one of my favorite effects. Yep, I think that pretty much wraps it up for this render. It was pretty quick, right? To give it a basic post-processing pass using these nodes. All nodes can be selected like this, and you can press M to mute it on and off to compare before and after, to see what you've done. As I said, the view transform adds its own flavor on top of it, and can alter the colors in a certain direction, or at least alter the base contrast levels. Anyway, for this render I will stick to AGX, non or base contrast. One thing I like to do for mastering though is activate curves there, and add a bit more punch to the tonal balance, maybe by lifting the curve near the mid-tones, as simple as that. You know, just to give it that final push. Looking at it, I'm starting to think it might need some color boost. Either in the saturation here. Let's see. Let's try to push it. A bit too aggressive. If you use it, go a small step up, like 1.1. But I'll mute it and go with color boost instead. Let's see. Yeah, I think it's better. It's much more forgiving. Yeah, just a bit more vibrancy. Now we're really done. Unless you're like me and you're still tweaking the mastering curve, squeezing every last drop of visual juice out of it before exporting it out. But honestly, I think that looks great. Time to stop. Or not. Maybe a second point in the highlights, pulling it down a bit to softly clump those areas will improve it. Will it make it look slightly more vintage, like film stock? I don't know, I get trapped into these endless micro adjustments too easily these days. Okay, now I declare it officially complete. Hopefully this gives you an idea of how to use a setup like this for a quick color grading / post-processing in Blender. Now I will split this window in two and open the image editor in the bottom one with the viewer node output, so we can actually save it as a final image in one of the final image formats. It won't be EXR this time. but rather PNG, for instance, or any other format meant for viewing. Post-processed. Save. We're good. Now we have an image file that can be actually viewed and shared, unlike EXRs that are mostly for work. That can't be easily opened, you know, in Windows. That one is ready to go. Here's the original render versus our quick post-pro pass. What do you think? Let us know. And if you'd like to download this preset, or rather a ready-to-use node chain for Blender's compositor, you can find the link on creativeshrimp.com or on our Gumroad. Again, this is not some ultra-professional post-processing setup, far from it, but rather it's a basic set of operations, the essentials only, but it can absolutely serve as a solid starting point for post-processing your renders. I hope it's useful to you. That was Gleb Alexandrov for creativeshrimp.com. Drink more coffee. And that's it.